Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. As some of you may know, one of my recent fascinations is with Moonstone, the skirmish tabletop game from Goblin King Games. I've done a few videos on this game already, showing some of the miniatures, and I'm hoping to get a playthrough on the channel at some point once I've got everything painted up. But recently, I managed to convince my wife to purchase me the Moonstone core rules book for my birthday. It actually isn't necessary to buy this rules book to play. Goblin King Games have made most of the things you need to play available online. You can get the basic rules set online, you can get printouts of the cards you need to play, and you can even get standees that you can print out to use in place of miniatures. But of course, a big part of the appeal of this game is the really lovely fairy tale theme, the beautiful artwork, and the lovely miniatures. So it isn't surprising that I wanted the proper hardback rules book, which is 106 pages long and is packed with narrative stories, artwork, scenarios, and just loads more content than you would get in the free pamphlet, or indeed the rules book that comes in the starter set for Moonstone, which is just the core rules with none of the extra fluff. So in this video, I'm just going to quickly flick through the book and show you a little bit of what's going on inside it. I'm not going to talk too much about the rules. I've already talked about the interesting card play mechanisms of this game in a previous video, and as I mentioned, I am hoping to do a playthrough at some point to show all of that in action on the tabletop. But I'm so impressed with this book in terms of the content and the lovely art that I just wanted to show some of it off on camera. As I mentioned before, it's 106 pages long and it is A4 sized, so it's a good sized tome. And friends, gnomes, countrymen, I come for buried moonstones and to raise them. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. So let it be with moonstones. That's nice. So yeah, it's quite a weighty tome and it's got a lot of stuff going on in there. It starts with some nice fluff. We've got a map of Torba, which is the main area of where this game is based. All of the main important locations are pointed out, and I have spotted the Tower of Grommel here, which is a particularly important location because it's where the wizards live, the mysterious wizards, which is an area of the narrative that they are exploring more with the new sourcebook that's coming out at the end of the year, The Arising. Moving on, you get a timeline of the history of Torba, and then you are into some cool little stories and some really nice line art. This is, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a goblin carrying a flamethrower basically. It's a very cool miniature that I do want to pick up. So there's a couple of little bits of story, and all of the narrative fiction in this has a special parchment background, so it sets it out from the actual rules, which is nice. It's a little thing, but it does make it easier to quickly pick out which bits of the book are rules and which bits are just for fluff. Next up is the section on the game rules, and Moonstone is relatively straightforward in terms of its rule set, except for the tricksy card combat and the card system used for arcane spells and special abilities. And in fact, the rules are only 20 pages in total, and 8 of those are dedicated solely to the melee combat rules. So it's not the hardest game in the world to pick up. Most of the learning comes from not internalizing the rules themselves, but from figuring out the strategies and the tactics that are necessary when you are using your combat cards. And the rules section is nicely laid out, lots of spacing, lots of examples. There's 2 pages on terrain, and I believe they are fleshing those rules out in the new The Arising sourcebook, and there's an FAQ online which also provides some additional information about terrain. There's a section on events and agendas. Those are an advanced concept. You don't need to use those straight away in your games. And then here we are in the combat section. We have 1 page detailing the 6 different types of attack in the combat deck, the basic melee attack action rules, an example using those basic actions, and then we have the advanced rules and examples, really nicely laid out examples. And those examples are really important because the card play is something that is unique to this game, and it is something that is going to take a little while to get to grips with. After that, more fiction. interspersed with some nice images of the painted miniatures, and the miniatures for this game are absolutely wonderful. Even when you paint them like me rather than painting them like the artist they got to paint these ones for these pictures. Next up is a section on the story scenarios. The rules cover a standard game which can be from 2 to 4 players, so either a head-to-head fight between 2 teams or more of a free-for-all with up to 4 teams, but these scenarios provide different ways to play the game, different little stories to play out, and they're relatively straightforward. Each scenario has a little narrative to introduce what's going on, some very simple setup and special rules, and then they give you a troop selection. They tell you recommended teams to play the scenario based on the story as written, but of course you can use any teams you want. If you don't want to use the team specified or you don't have those particular miniatures, you just need to pick teams that you're happy with, and some of the scenarios have special advice on what kind of selections you should make. For example, this first scenario says that they don't recommend you pick any highly mobile characters for the attacker side, just to maintain the balance of the scenario. So we have numerous scenarios: Scenario 1, Scenario 2, Scenario 3, which introduces Drunk Fritz and has a special character card for him. Scenario 4, and you can see at the top of each one of these scenarios it tells you how many players it's for. The first couple of scenarios were for just 2 players, but now we're into scenarios that can cope with up to 4 players. Scenario 6 is back to 2 players again. And then there are rules for double-headed giant format, which is a team game where you have multiple players controlling a team. More narrative, more fiction. There is so much fiction packed into this book. And then there is a big section at the end on characters. And this is pretty much all of the characters that were from the first wave of the game. So all of the characters they had up to the point they produced this book, and maybe a few that they had planned in the pipeline. But there are many characters that exist now that aren't in this book, and I would assume they will all be appearing in a section in the new The Arising book. I do really like this section because you can look at all of the abilities and a little bit of history of each of the characters, and it can help you to make selections on what you want to add to your team next. You get to see their special advanced combat ability, any passive and active abilities they have, and all of their stats, and of course a nice little image of them. My one complaint about this section of the book is that they have these cards positioned over the lovely artwork. I would rather see those cards positioned in such a way that you do not have them covering up any of the art. The art is such a big selling point of this game, it's a shame that anything should obscure it. But anyway, as you can see, lots of cool characters. And this fills up the last section of the book, apart from some more narrative stuff right at the very end. Here we are in the Goblins section. My boys, we've got Doug the Flatulent, the Vicious Midget, and Beaky Bobby, who I already have. And then we have some other goblins that I would be interested in picking up. Booty's Bilge is the pirate goblins that I have. They are from a later wave of miniatures, so they're not in this particular book. But there is C6 Stew. C6 Stew is another goblin pirate who will fit quite nicely into my Booty's Bilge force. And here's that fire spitter that we saw the line art for earlier. It's a goblin carrying a barrel of something highly flammable. And here's Grub, lovely Grub, who has managed to turn himself into a bug. And then we're into the fairies, and the fairies are really cool. They look really sinister, really evil. It's a really interesting take on normally the fair and beautiful creatures of the woods. Wasp is one of my particular favourites. And there we go, we're pretty much there at the end of the book. As I said, just another story at the end, just to round out the book in style. And there we go. And that's it. And there's the back cover with some of the painted miniatures. And what a great book this is. I think Moonstone is a lovely game, and this rules book really does present it in a fantastic way. This is the kind of rules book I really enjoy because it's packed with images of the miniatures, artwork for the characters, background for the characters, stories, scenarios to play. It's got absolutely everything I'm looking for in this type of book. And I believe it retailed for £20, purchased from Goblin King Games directly. So I guess that's it from me for now. Gather ye moonstones while ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same stone that lights the way by dawn will be dying. Seize the moonstone. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.